Good
morning, members. Well, first of all, thank you for coming so early in the morning to attend the special meeting of the Manpower panel. And we know that in the past, many members are very concerned about the Employment Support Scheme, ESS. Hence the special meeting today to discuss the ESS. So perhaps we will first invite the administration team to join us, please. The government team comprises Dr. Lo Chi-kwong, Secretary for Labour and Welfare, and then the Deputy Head of Policy Innovation Coordination Office, Ms. Joyce Ho, and the Deputy Secretary for Development. So the focus today is on the ESS. Recently, we've read newspaper reports, and the third batch of employers list has been published. So today, we would like to discuss this particular scheme. All right. So can I now invite the Secretary to speak? So members who would like to speak, please raise their hand. So the paper has been circulated to members already, so I will not spend any more time to take you through the paper. As we all know, we have uploaded the list of third batch employers, and we have approved the fourth batch. And very soon, the fifth batch of employers will be approved soon. So I'm happy to take questions from members. So members, Prince Xiu Ping, Yu Si Wing, Michael Look, and Ms. Eunice Yong. Any other member? If not, then. So let's have this several members asking first. Mr. Prince Xiu Ping.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to declare interest. The organization I belong to has already applied for the subsidy under ESS scheme. As the Secretary has mentioned, this scheme, the list of employers approved under the ESS has already been uploaded. Under the present economic situation, we understand that the unemployed are facing grave financial burden. In applying for subsidies, well, the employers have to go through a lot of process, but I know that the government has rolled out different measures to assist them. For the tourism sector, I understand that quite a lot of people working under the tourism sector have been suffering from underemployment or unemployment. Many of them have zero income in the past months. Some of the organizations that I belong to, I understand. They told me that there are some drivers. They are eligible to apply for the $10,000 subsidy. However, I understand that because the company asked them to go for unpaid leave, but then they rejected it, so they were laid off. So the employee wanted to apply for subsidy under the ESS. However, because his employer has already laid him off and then has already stamped on a letter stating that, that they have no employment relation. So, in other words, the employee became ineligible. So this circumstance is really very unfair to the employee, because we understand that the measures are supposed to be here to assist the employees. So my comments are as follows. The unemployment situation is quite serious. I have grave concern about it. And the unemployment figure has not reached its ceiling yet. And in 2019, there were 12,000 odd people unemployed, but now it's already 18,000. So it's risen by 47% unemployment rate. Of course, the administration has eased or relaxed the requirement for unemployment application for unemployment CSSA. However, the living condition or the livelihood will be seriously affected because the breadwinner is unemployed. So I think the government should perhaps take a look or review the existing measures and set up an unemployment subsidy scheme perhaps the government should also assist the employer as well in. I wonder if the secretary can devise a comprehensive unemployment scheme to set up a fund to assist the unemployed. I'd like to ask the secretary if he has any thoughts about it. Secretary? Well, Chairman, regarding unemployment assistance scheme, the LegCo has had thorough discussion about it. If we are to review the existing unemployment assistance schemes in place, of course, this is most welcome. However, we have to understand that we have to handle the problems facing us right now. For instance, the hedging between the MPF and also the severance pay, etc. We do have a lot of work to do. Before this problem is ironed out, I don't think it's the right time for us to have an overhaul or review the existing unemployment assistance schemes. So I think we have to give priority to the hedge funds problem first. That is the LSP and SP offsetting problem. That should have the highest priority. Mr. Yu Siwing, our company has already applied and also received subsidies from the relevant scheme. From June last year onwards, because of the social incident, the tourism sector has been hard hit. The government announced that from January to March 2020, the company, the tourist agency, could apply for subsidies according to the headcounts on its payroll. However, there are a lot of travel agencies that have asked its employees to go for unpaid leave from January. We are very grateful that the Secretary has taken heed of our opinions, and they have advance the application period or the employment period from January 2020 to December 2019. So a large number of unemployed travel agency staffs have been able to benefit from the scheme because of that. And also during the meeting with the Secretary, we also have raised a suggestion about the problem of penalty that might make people try to avoid incurring penalty, and so the employer would rather lay off its employees. Well, some of the enterprises rather lay off its employees instead of incurring a penalty under this scheme. So we are grateful that the administration has also taken heed of our views and relaxed the requirements in the relevant aspect. So this is really most helpful to both the employers and the employees. Right now, people at the age of 65, if they do not have MPF accounts, and his previous employers or himself have no contribution to MPF, so it is impossible for them to provide income proof. I've asked your colleagues about this point, and they replied that actually they could provide relevant documents to support them. However, eventually this has turned out that it is not helpful, and the government would not accept those as supporting documents. So this group of people at the age of 55 or above, they have no contribution to MPF, and they therefore they are not eligible to apply for the unemployment subsidies under ESS. I know that a lot of employees under different sectors are facing similar problem. I'd like to ask the administration if you could go back and rethink the way to help this group of people. Another point is that you have a requirement set down asking the employer to protect the employment of people, including this group of people who are at 65 or above and who have not contributed to the MPF. So this seems to be unfair. I've checked with the relevant department, and the reply was that this problem would be considered in the future tranches of subsidies. I'd like to ask the Secretary if in the next round any enhancement could be made. Secretary? Chairman, regarding people at the age of 65 or above, yes, we have heard a lot of opinions about the problem facing or faced by this group of people. As you all know, we try to roll out the assistance measure as soon as possible. So it is not possible for us at this point to ask additional information from the employers, because if we are to handle a lot of applications, we might take longer time. So now our thinking is that the first round of ESS the disbursement will be completed by July. So if we are thinking about the second round, perhaps we could streamline the application procedures. There might be some room for us to handle or to cater for this group of people, or the group of the people that have been left out from the first round, just like this group of people that you mentioned, that is at the age of 65 or above, they have no document proof of their contribution to the MPF. So yes, indeed, we have not been able to take care of them during the first round. So in the coming round, we will be thinking of some measures to take care of them. Chairman? For the second round, I hope that the guidelines could be clearer. That is, what sort of documents they should provide, and that will be acceptable to the administration. Well, if there are people that are not eligible to apply for the assistance, then I think they should be excluded from the employer's record of headcounts. That would be fairer. Chairman? The designated period is from December to March of 2020, and it is up to the employer to choose which 3 months to account for. Mr. Luk Chung Hong, I wonder if you all noticed that there is no members from the opposition camp. Well, one is coming in. All right, at least just one. I think the majority of them are not here. It's really very strange. They want the society, they want people to burn with them, and I really wonder why, when we are talking about unemployment and assistance to the unemployed, they are not present. Well, I'm so glad that there are still some of us here, because we are really very concerned about the unemployed. We really have to support the enterprises and also to assist the unemployed. However, regrettably, the ESS is not perfect. There's still a lot of room for improvement. The Secretary has always claimed that he has a very high IQ. I wonder why this scheme is so far from perfection. And there are loopholes all over the place. There are 154 employers, as we heard from the media yesterday, that 150 odd employers stated that their headcounts on the payroll was 0. I wonder why. Is that a loophole that they have taken advantage of? Perhaps in March to April they have already sack all of their employees, and that's why on their payroll the headcount is 0. And this is really, it shows that the scheme has loopholes. I'd like to ask the Secretary, in the second round of the scheme, Is there a requirement stating that the headcounts in the second round should not be lower than that stated in the first round during the first round of application? The second question is that the government is going to open time-limited employment, time-limited scheme. I'd like to know if the government would ask these short-term employees to vet these applications in order to plug the loopholes. And the third question is about other unemployment support measures. In last year, October to November, we already have raised the suggestion of rolling out these kind of support measures. The secretary at that time stated that there were still a lot of problems. They had to take a long time to think of a more comprehensive measure. But I'd like to ask the secretary, now that there are only 2/3 of employers who have applied for the ESS, and there is still a surplus of over 10 billion. So I'd like to know if it's possible to set up a fund, for a short-term fund, so that the unemployed could apply for it. As we know, there are different requirements if one has to apply for CSSA. I'd like to know if the government would consider setting up this kind of emergency fund.
Secretary, thank you. Well, we are yet to map out the framework for the second tranche, but definitely we are going to incorporate the experience in the first tranche. Mr. Michael Look referred to a certain scenario in the design of the first tranche. If an employer gets the subsidy from the government and in June, July, and August, the entire subsidy amount will be spent on the paying wages to the employees. And on the surface, maybe in the information provided to the trustee in March, that the number of headcount might just be 0. But then after they've received the subsidy, wage subsidy in June, July, August, they have to employ people to and spend the subsidy, or else the subsidy will be clawed back. Now, for our processing agent, I know that they have devoted a lot of manpower into the work. If I remember correctly, some 200 people were employed, but how many of them are temporary staff members? I don't have the information, but I believe there are certainly such members. Staff members. So the scheme will last for 6 months or even 8 to 9 months. So there will be temporary staff members brought in definitely. Now, when we talk about the Unemployment Assistance Fund, the unemployment rate at that time was 2.8 to 3%. And in the next couple of years, I don't think that the unemployment rate will drop back to 3%, taking into account the world economic situation. So sometimes temporary jobs may last for a few years. So this may easily turn out to be a long-term program. So things could not really be completed in, say, 2 to 3 years, especially when we're talking about unemployment relief fund. Ms. Eunice Yong, about the $7,500 for self-employed persons SEPs. I have a question on that. I have applied for that as well because I am also an SEP, and some of my, actually many of my lawyer friends have also applied. But unfortunately, the applications have been rejected and the reasons were not given. And I and my lawyer friends have tried to email you, but there hasn't been a reply after several weeks have passed. So for the $7,500 for SEPs, do you have any figures on the number of applications rejected? Have you given them any reasons? And also, have you tried to follow up on why they are ineligible? I think the mechanism is rather simple. So long as you have got an FPF account and you have contributed it to it in the past, and the account is still active, there seems to be no other criterion to be fulfilled, and that doesn't seem to be income limit either. So I find it rather strange. And also, I would like to follow up on the number of employees being 0, and the employers still get a subsidy. And the secretary explained that so long as new people are hired in June, July, August, then there is not a problem. So if the company, say, closes down or winds up in this period, is there any way for the government to claw back the subsidy? How is the monitoring like? Thank you. Secretary, under the ESS, there are some 270,000 applications from SEPs, and some 160,000 people are ineligible. And the reason being that they're really not possessing or owning a dedicated SEP MPF account. And actually, many of them are really employee MPF accounts or personal accounts created after the termination of previous self-employment or after the people have retired. So the application criteria are rather specific. And under the MPF system, the SEP account has been defined clearly. So under the MPF, there are different categories of MPF accounts. It's just that people are not very clear about the different categories of MPF accounts. So SEPs should be contributing to an SEP dedicated account instead of a personal account or an account created after the termination of previous self-employment. So I believe that the community doesn't know too much or understand too much about the MPF system, so more publicity has to be done. So, Secretary, can I suggest that you do more explanation? Well, let me talk about my own experience. I have been contributing to the MPF account for over a decade. Previously, we might be employed by a company, and then we switch our contribution to an SEP account. It's not the problem with the SEP. Maybe the MPF companies have not explained to the contributors or the employees clearly. So as long as they have made contribution, I mean, is there a possibility for you to consider their applications again? Well, for people who or employers who have received a subsidy but then closed down during this particular period, i.e. June to August, all the subsidy will be clawed back. Can I defer to Ms. Ho to say something more about the MPF system? Ms. Yong, you might have received a notice that telling you that your application has been rejected. You can approach our secretariat within 14 days. Maybe you have filled out the wrong number, and that doesn't match with the information provided by the trustee. So maybe you can approach us within 14 days, and we may be asking for you for further information, say on your MPF account number, and then we can check that with the trustee's information. The secretary said some 160,000 applications have been rejected. This is a serious problem. Many of them are SEPs. So if conditions permit, please follow up on those rejected applications as soon as possible. Dr. N. Zhang, thank you. Chairman? The government has been very generous this time in launching the ESS. And I believe, indeed, it can help safeguard jobs of employees. But then after all, we are still talking about several months. Recently, I know that some businesses, particularly SMEs, they're, say, hanging in the balance in their business operations, and the government is helping them to pay salaries their employees. This is good. But then after these several months, they may not be able to hold out any longer. In this several months, has there been a rise in the number of people applying for bankruptcy? I don't have the information on hand. Yes, the rise is quite marked. Well, actually, the rising trend started from the end of last year. We are very worried. Now, have you made plans, say, after several months down the road, the epidemic has not eased, is not easing, and the world economy is still in distress, what will happen? Some people are saying that the epidemic will last for another year, another whole year. And even if vaccines come on market, will these vaccines be able to be effective? And even if this is so, it takes at least another year to mass produce the vaccines, and many businesses can't hold out for another year. So can we make some preparatory work? Will the ESS continue? And or how can you continue to help those who will not have an income? Secretary, like what Dr. N. Zheng said, the economic prospects are not very optimistic. How is the situation like by the end of this year? I think it's too premature to make any forecast. But we will be keeping close tabs on the development of the global economy. Hong Kong is an open economy, and the world economy will have great implications on the Hong Kong economy, especially our external trade. So we'll be keeping close tabs on the market. And the ESS subsidy will last till November. We will be closely monitoring the situation to see how the government can face the challenge together with the community. It's too early to say categorically what we're going to do, but I believe that at an appropriate time, then we will come up with measures to stimulate the economy. And the FS has also emphasized the same himself. Secretary, for the application on CSSA under unemployment, has the number risen, and how is the situation like? I will not give you the detailed figures. In April, the number of CSSA applications has increased most. So on year, it has doubled, and in April, it has risen by some 40%. In May, the number has dropped slightly, but it's still on the rising trend. But then the rise has slowed down a bit. We haven't got the figures for June, but it seems that there will still be an increase, but then the increase will be slowing. Secretary, for applications in March and April, when will the money be given? Well, normally that can be done within a month. So we have finished working on those made in April. Mr. Kok Wei Kang. Thank you, Chairman. Several questions from myself. And we have the names of the employers have been made public recently. Some companies who are opposing the government have been successful in their applications. Some people wonder why. And for the ESS, the original intent is very clear, and that is to help those businesses or enterprises who are about to wind down and help them to sustain for a few months. But then there is a problem arising. The subsidy will be given till the end of the year, but what will happen after the end of the year? Ultimately, say, if the businesses cannot sustain anymore like the Ocean Park, then the unemployment rate will definitely rise further. So has the government made any projections? Will it be following up on that? And has the LWB studied together with the CEDB and other bureaus as to what the focus of the government should be on so that the unemployment rate will not nosedive or rise markedly further? So that's my first question. Second question. For businesses which have closed down, the relevant employees have to apply for CSSA. And the Secretary said that the CSA's figures have doubled. compared with that of last year. But then a lot of frontline workers have told us that they might belong to a family of 4, and 2 of them are working people, and one is out of job, the other is not. But then the one who is out of job will not pull the entire household into the scrutiny under the application. So has the government made any assessment on that? Have you made any assessment of the relevant figures so that you will know how to help those out of job? And what are the difficulties they face? Have you tried to understand? Well, under the SWD, there is the Family Service Center. Have they received any requests for help in that? The unemployed is not willing to apply for CSSA, and then as a result, the family is plunged into different problems. Have you got any statistics? Like the answer to Dr. N. Chang, I've said that the government is very concerned about the blooming or the economic prospects. There are a number of bills which will resume second reading debate in the Legislative, and they have a lot to do with the economic development. In fact, the first 5 bills are related to our economic issues. So if we can pass the bill on maternity leave as soon as possible, that will help with Hong Kong's economic development. As for households where one of the family members is out of job, we have discussed that before. In our discussion on the CSA, we have discussed whether the applicant can apply for CSSA on an individual basis instead of a household basis. And that has to do with the government's overall policy. So if we do not take into account the family functions of a household, then that will have long-term implications on the society. So we'll have to be very mindful about the family impact. So the family impact is a very important consideration in the government's overall policy considerations.
Well, in the past, when unemployment rates rose, the application for CSSA also increased, and there were incidents like family violence, etc., would also increase. So the Family Service Center under SWD would pay close attention to that. It's my turn. Yes, Secretary, indeed, I hope that the bill on the maternity leave could be passed as soon as possible. Well, about ESS, it's a good thing, and it's welcomed by people. As we can see that there are a large number of applications. We really hope that the scheme can help those out of job and also could alleviate their financial burden. But then the government has to put in a lot of resources to come up with this scheme. We have received now 32 cases of violation of the scheme. Of course, we believe that most of the employers are good. They would not try to abuse the scheme. However, we can't rule out the possibility that there might be some employers who want to abuse the scheme. So I'd like to ask about these 32 cases of violation. What are the specifics about them? Are there any penalties for those employers? I'd like to defer this question to Ms. Ho. Thank you, Chairman. By the 5th of July, we have received 38 cases of violation of the ESS by the employers. There are false calculation of contracted staff and also the unreasonable dismissal of staff. And the third is the closing down of the company or the change of the operators. So what would be the follow-up actions on the government side if these cases when these cases were received? Well, for the Secretariat, first after receiving the reporting cases, we would contact the agent, and the agent would go to, or the program processing agents would go to check the company. They would go on site and look for documents and also talk with the employers and would ask them to provide documents and information to check the truthfulness of the information. We also have a vetting scheme for the complicated cases. This will be reported to us, the PICO, and we will also have designated staff to follow up on those cases. All right, the second question is how we're going to plug the loopholes of the scheme. As the Secretary said, in the second round, it would consider different ways of plugging the loopholes. As mentioned by our members, the people at the age of 65 or above, many of them are excluded from the scheme. So perhaps we should really take a closer look at the problem of these group of people, because they are out of employment, and at this age it would be difficult for them to be re-employed. So we really hope that in the second round the government would take a closer look at how to help them out. And the second question about the SEP's application, there are 140,000 cases that are deemed ineligible. So there might be a lot of SEPs that have perhaps filled out the forms wrongly, or they do not understand the requirements, etc. Will you perhaps iron these problems out in the second round? Well, Chairman, as Mr. Yeo has pointed out, there are over 10,000 elderly people at the age of 65 or above who have MPF accounts. However, during the present round of the application, we find that many of them did not contribute to the MPF in the past. And so in the present way of calculation, these group of people would be or have been excluded. So we will, in the second round, try to find ways to help them out, to see whether we could provide assistance to the relevant employers so that they can retain this group of people in the employment, so as to make them eligible to apply for the scheme when they are out of job. As regards the SEPs, as you all know, we try to roll out the ESS ASAP. So we set down the overall framework, and in a very short period of time, we rolled out the scheme. And that is why we did not have enough time to think of all the details. And indeed, there are some loopholes. And in the past, for instance, people had not paid a lot of attention to whether to contribute to the MPFs, or how the personal MPFs or the employer's MPFs are differentiated. And so there are a lot of gray areas. We agree that in the second tranche, we have to give it a deeper thinking. So there are people who are ineligible. About half of the applicants become ineligible for the assistance. So in the second round, we will think of how we could make it clearer and how to solve the problem of these SEPs. Dr. Fernando Cheung, Chairman, we've already criticized this scheme as squandering public money, because there is no way of guaranteeing that the money would really go to the employees' pockets. We really have serious doubt whether the needy people, especially the unemployed, can really benefit from the scheme. It now turns out that there are a lot of unemployed that have been excluded, and they could not benefit from the scheme. And the precious public money have eventually gone to the pockets of the employers. As we all know, the Hong Kong Sanatorium have received the biggest amount of the subsidies under ESS. Is it really suffering a lot economically? Well, it says that there were less people from the mainland patronizing them or using their services, but they have been making a lot of money in the past. And the second example is Centerline. They had made a lot of money in the past, and the the owner or the founder had made a lot of money. So just imagine these huge enterprises are able to benefit from this scheme. But then in the past, when the economy was good, they were the one that stand to benefit from the prospering economy. So it is really unfair for these small companies like HKTV malls. They actually have increased their business during the epidemic, and they have been able to receive tens of millions of money from the ESS. I really think it's unfair because they are not losing money. We have to help the people who are really in need. You are actually supporting the enterprises. You are not safeguarding employment for the management companies, etc. Under the epidemic, they still have to manage the properties, so they are not really incurring a lot of losses. And there are also legal and accounting companies. They are actually still having quite a lot of business. So I really think that the money have not gone to the pockets of the people really in need. You can just roll out unemployment assistance, not this kind of schemes. It would be very useful if you use this money to build more elderly homes and put it to social welfare and help the low-income households and unemployed, not to give out money for the big enterprises. Just look at, for instance, Fulham Group. Some employees complained that they had been out of job since February. They had stopped their salary, their payroll. And then the employer started to recruit younger people or people of lower wages during this time. And these replacements have been counted or included on their payroll. And the second example is that there was a worker who had been out of job for a number of months. He knows that the employer has applied for the scheme, and the employer was able to receive over $9,000, but then the employee could only get 5,000 odd into his pocket. So I'd really like to know how many cases or how many employers have been found to have violated this scheme and what kind of penalty are in place. Well, Chairman, we have so far received 38 complaints. We are conducting an investigation into each and every one of them. And we try to process the pending applications ASAP. As we've said at the outset, if we have to check each company or each employer, see how much it has earned or has incurred loss, then we will have to spend over 10 years before we could roll out a scheme. So it is really impossible for us to handle over 100 to 200,000 employees' applications. So the dilemma is that we wanted to roll out the scheme as soon as possible so as to help the people in a timely manner. And on the other hand, it would not be possible for us to spend time in coming up with a very detailed and specific scheme and with all kinds of measures to check the financial situation of each and every one of the applicants. So we hope that in June, July, and August, we try to be able to cover this period, and then in coming around, we will try to cover that area. And well, Chairman, I'm just asking whether the Secretary has imposed penalty on the violating companies. We have received 38 complaints. We are conducting investigations right now, and the subsidies have just been dispersed. So we are handling the 3 months, June, July, and August. This is only the 8th of June, so 8 days have just passed. So the we have to wait till at least 10th of July in order to receive all the relevant information. So up to today, we are still in lack of the relevant information so far. Chairman, the Secretary has always said that the ESS is an expediency and a simple framework would be needed in order to roll it out as soon as possible. Well, it is obviously beneficial to the employers, but then the truly needy persons, that is the employee, cannot benefit. Of course, the administration has taken heed of some of our opinions, and some measures have been eased out and relaxed. But then I still think that it is very unfair because the government has been very generous to the employers, however, have been very stringent in vetting the applications of the employees. So this is really very unfair. And there is inequitable distribution of resources. When you look at the paper, the first tranche up to June, mid of June, there are only there are 2/3 of the employers who have applied, and it is lower than the expected 70 or 80%. But then among the application, about half of the SEP's application have been rendered ineligible. So I'd like to ask the Secretary, is it because you have a wrong estimate of the market situation? Why is it that there is such a big difference between your estimate and the real outcome of applications and successful applications? Second, how do you think the ESS can really help lower unemployment? I hope to give the Secretary an opportunity to give a estimate of the second or the future rounds of the scheme.
Thank you, Secretary. The number of applications is lower than what I expected. Well, the reasons why employers have not come forth to apply, there are two main reasons. One is related to the risk of tarnishing the reputation of the employers, particularly when we look at US and the UK and the situation in Liverpool. For those applying for government subsidy will be criticized by the people. So there is a risk of a tarnishing of the reputation of the employers. Now, for some of the employers, even if we pay half of the salary, $9,000, they still cannot sustain their business because of other operating costs. So as a result, they didn't come forth to make an application. So apart from these, there are other employers who do not understand the ESS, so they don't apply. So we are now thinking about how to design the second tranche scheme. How should we strike a balance? We would like to help as many enterprises as possible, but at the same time, we have to prevent abuse. So if the framework is too stringent, that will be deterrent to the employers. But if it's too lenient, that will also be counterproductive. So these are the factors to be taken on board for second tranche. Now, as for unemployment rate, we are keeping close tabs on that. As you know, in April, May, June, the average unemployment rate will be announced on the 10th of July, the unemployment rate. We will be looking at the changes in the average unemployment rate for 3 months to assess the situation. Now, the impact of the ESS on the unemployment rate, I think we can only look at or assess the results after half a year's time. But looking at non-quantitative indicators in our dialogue with the employers, we see that some employers have given up plans to sack their staff because of ESS. Some employees have also been rehired to make up for the figures because they know that the committed payroll headcount in June, July, and August should not be less than that in March. Mr. Peter Shill. Thank you, Secretary. Well, I'd like to thank the Secretary. Sometimes I argue with you, but in this session that you have rolled out policies to help people, including proposing the 14-week maternity leave, and also the ESS, which is a complicated scheme. Now, as for the 60 employees aged 65 or above, you have made a lot of changes. You have incorporated those over 65 years old in the catering business, the transport sector. And then you also said that even for those who haven't made a contribution to the MPF, as long as they are within the list, then you can look at the monthly income, still wage subsidy will be given to them. So you've been trying to think of ways to help people. Well, nothing can be perfect, of course. Now, I've got this case. This is a new case. 9 employees, 3 of them are aged over 65. Well, their income records are not there, and we've got names to those employees only. So the wage subsidy is given only to the 6 employees and not for the 3 who are aged over 65. But the question, you have to notify the company. You must tell the company to keep the jobs for the 9 employees. But then the company said that you only give wage subsidies for 6 people. So why am I asked to keep 6 or 9 jobs rather? If I don't do so, then the wage subsidy will be clawed back. So I don't know why that is the case. A lot of fellow members have also asked this question. If this is indeed a true case, well, please think of ways to amend it. Now, for the second tranche, now if for those aged over 65, their records are shown in the MPF account list, even if there is no record to their income, please cover them under the subsidy. Please help them. Dr. Fernando Zhang said that the scheme helps only the employers and not the employees. I would like to say this to Dr. Fernando Zhang. So ask how many enterprises were originally intending to close down, but because of the ESS, they are trying still to stay afloat, and people's jobs are still kept. Is it something wrong that we try to keep the company afloat and reserve the jobs? I think should we just give the benefit to the employees? Is it the right direction? The money comes from the taxpayers' money. So if there is a need, why is it wrong that we try to help the companies? Centerline property, haven't they paid tax also? Well, they are one of the largest real estate companies in Hong Kong. It's just right that they get a large sum because of the large number of employees. And Hong Kong and Sanatorium, it's one of the major players in the healthcare system. Are you saying that it's wrong to help them? Are you trying to pit yourself against these healthcare people? So are you going to stand for a re-election for the next electoral? Well, I've heard news that you're going to stand for election in the next term. I think it's important that we support enterprises and keep jobs. Secretary, please give a brief reply. Thank you, Mr. Xiu, for your question. Under the ESS, indeed, we would like to keep the enterprises afloat so that the jobs can be kept. That is the essence of the scheme. Now, as for the question about employees over 65 years old, I've given answer to that and will not repeat the answer. You've quoted a case. The companies have not given information on the income of the employees. So that's why there is this case. But in June, July, August, when they give information to the trustee, then if they are giving the relevant information on the income, they will not be penalized. It's best if they can give the amount of the MPF contribution as well. But for other information given to the trustee, then it will be helpful. Now, we are still thinking of how we can further improve the second tranche so that the employers that you mentioned can also be assisted. So we are finished with the first round, and there are members who would like to ask a second round. So 3 minutes each. And then we also have a motion tabled moved by Mr. Michael Look and Mr. Wycombe. So those upstairs, if you want to join in the discussion, please come down. Ms. Eunice Yong, Pun Xiuping, Michael Look, and Fernando Zhang, and myself. Chairman, we talked about people aged over 65. We must care for them. I'm also concerned about the young people. The results of the DSE are going to be announced soon. There will be new fresh graduates. Unemployment rate is very high, 5.9%. I'm very concerned about DSE graduates and university graduates. They will have great difficulties in finding a job. So there has been a debate on whether we should help the employers or the employees. I think we should help both. We should help employees so that employers so that they can keep the jobs. So going forward, does the government have any new measures to help employers to hire DSE graduates and also fresh graduates from universities? Secretary, under the Anti-Epidemic Fund, there will be 30,000 time-limited jobs to be provided, of which 14,000 will be provided by the government departments on a proactive basis. And for the remaining 10,000 or so, we are working with professional bodies and chambers of commerce, hopefully to set up jobs, or create jobs rather. Earlier, we said that the Environment Bureau will have collaboration plans with the private sector to create time-limited jobs. And most of them are really pitched at the fresh graduate level. In the engineering sector, there is a Scheme A. The number of jobs will be increased from 1,000 from 270 Y. So the number of fresh graduates from the engineering sector will be 1,400. So most of them will be helped, and then all the employers will also get a subsidy every month of $5,800. We are still exploring the idea with the chambers of commerce. Secondly, for secondary school leavers at the Labor Department every year, around 5,000 to 4,000 to 5,000 secondary school leavers will join the labor market. They have difficulties in working, seeking a job. So we have the youth employment training programs, which can help 3,000 to 4,000 students every year. For those who do not articulate to the tertiary education institutions, most of them will be covered by YETP. This year, we will further enhance the program. And if an employer takes on a young person under YETP, starting from September, the allowance will be increased. We hope that our young people can join the labor market after graduation as soon as possible through offering different programs. Mr. Michael, look. Employment assistance scheme can be helpful, and we hope that there should be more targeted assistance programs in different sectors. And for the Federation of Trade Unions, FTU, we've been making proposals on enhancing the employment situation in 2 to 3 sectors. One sector is the aviation industry, which employs a large number of people. While the service of aviation service has practically been suspended, and there has been a drastic drop in freight transport as well. So those in the catering industry, a retail industry, in the airport do not have any work. And also flight attendants, the logistics support staff are on no paid leave, and their salary has been increased by half sometimes. And the FTU has talked a lot to the THB. So can special measures or special subsidy schemes be rolled out? The construction sector is also affected, but it's not the worst sector. So under the anti-epidemic fund, the construction worker is given $1,500 plus $7,500. How come that this doesn't apply to those in the aviation sector? Now, on the tourism sector, a subsidy of $5,000 lasting for 6 months is given to the practitioners. While the tourism sector relies on inbound travelers, and Hong Kong is half locked down, so it will be at least till the end of the year where we'll be seeing signs of revival. So we believe that the borders will not be opened up in the near term. So can there be another round of subsidy? And the third sector is the workers working on vessels plying between Hong Kong and Macau. They have zero income now. Those working in Shuntek and so on, they don't have to pay a mandatory MPF contribution under the Merchants Vessels Ordinance. So they don't pay the contribution to the MPF, and they don't have work. So can tailor-made programs be drawn up for these three sectors, Secretary? We know that the tourism and the aviation sectors have been the hardest hit. Well, over 99% of the air passengers have been lost, and 30 to 40% of the freight transport has been lost, and the tourism sector is in the doldrum. And under the anti-epidemic funds, apart from ESS, there are other subsidy programs for them as well. What's going to happen in the future? We will be closely monitoring the situation. If the stakeholders, or rather, the THB will be looking closely at the transport situation, and the CEDB will also be monitoring the tourism sector as well. When it comes to the employment contract, we know that the situation for those working on vessels is rather special. So if you have any specific suggestions, please, submit them to us.
Mr. Poon Xiuping. Thank you, Chairman. In the course of the discussion, the Secretary mentioned that in the coming 2 to 3 years, the unemployment rate would not drop drastically. We can expect a continuous period of high unemployment. I think the government really have to take a comprehensive look to see how we could help or safeguard employment. It's not just through unemployment support measures. These measures alone would not be enough. As we understand, the second tranche of the scheme would begin soon. I'd like to ask the Secretary about the detailed arrangements or regulations under the second tranche. When will you announce the specifics? And second, about the 38 cases of violation of ESS. We really don't want to see the scheme being abused by the employers. Well, you mentioned that the agent or the processing, system or the processing agent would do site investigation and also on-site checking. And I'd like to know the details about it. And also the governments will be recruiting some time-limited employees for certain posts. I'd like to know about the details of this as well. I remember that last year when I was participating in an event organized by your association, I discussed with your members, and I encouraged them to conduct more discussions and reflect your views to the administration. Of course, we agree that the present scheme have loopholes. We do need to enhance it and plug the loopholes. We welcome your views, and we agree that more discussion would be needed. For the second tranche of the scheme, we would receive application from the end of August. So we believe that in early August, we'll be able to announce the details, and we'll do promotion activities by then. There will not be drastic changes to the scheme. There will just be some enhancements and adjustments here and there. We try our best to cover the peoples who have been left out by the first tranche of the scheme. So in early August, we will be able to announce the details of the second tranche. We do spot checks, but we will not disclose the percentage of the spot checks incidents. This is risk-based. There might be some cases or some companies or employers that have higher risk of violating the scheme or providing false information or documents. So for these cases, we will follow up and we will conduct on-site checking. For the lower risk companies or employers, we will not conduct those spot checks. For the additional jobs by the government, that is time-limited jobs, I don't have the number at hand. So I will be able to provide that afterwards. Dr. Fernando Jiang, just now Mr. Xiu Ka-fei mentioned about me. Very evidently, Mr. Xiu does not understand the real situation out there. What we are asking for is for the public money to be well spent, not just to benefit or support the companies, the big companies and enterprises that have been making money in the past. These big enterprises have been able to receive over tens of millions of dollars under this scheme. This is really a waste of public money. If you look at Europe, for instance, the UK, they subsidize or they support the employees who have been dismissed or whose wages have been reduced. So the person that has suffered from a reduced wage or who have been dismissed will be able to apply for this scheme, and a subsidy of £2,800 of subsidy will be given to these people. Then the employer will not need to dismiss the person, and there is no age limit. We are really age discriminating. For others, like people in Europe, their scheme are very clear, straightforward. Whoever that is unemployed or who have suffered from a lower or from a reduced wage can apply, and they can get the money directly, and they do not need to go through the employer in order to get this government subsidies. Because for our case, we can see abuses here and there. For instance, Fulam Group, they have received the $9,000 of subsidies from the government, which is supposed to be for the employee, but then they just give out $5,000 to each employee. So they have been able to pocket $4,000 for each employee. So this is unfair, and this is the loophole where all these government subsidies should be used to pay the salaries or the wages of the employees. And that is the point. That is why I say that this is unfair. I think Xiu Ka-fei totally does not understand the real situation. I'm not saying that we should not support the employees. We should not safeguard employment. I'm just saying that the money should go to the right places. We have fishing and also tourism, catering industry, etc. All these, the money, the subsidies have gone to the pockets of the employers, because they have to go through the employers to disperse the money to the employees. So I really think that this is a big loophole, and this is so unfair, and it is a big waste of public money. Secretary. Chairman, I do not have things to add. Dr. Jiang has expressed his view. Thank you. It's my turn then. Secretary, I agree that we have to help both the employer and the employees. Of course, during the first tranche, people have noticed the big enterprises that have benefited. But when we look clearly, there are also on the list some small enterprises and small companies that have been able to benefit from the scheme. So we also believe that most of the employers are good employers. They would not abuse the scheme, and they would give the money or the entire sum to the employees. But of course, we hope that in the future tranche, we will be able to enhance the scheme and plug the loopholes wherever there are. So, and especially for the SEPs, self-employed peoples, and also people 65 or above, I think they have been excluded and they have not been able to benefit from this scheme. And there are a lot of inquiries and questions among the SEPs why their applications have not been successful. So I hope the administration can explain more clearly so that there will be more room for them to apply for the scheme and to become eligible for this scheme. There are also some people who have been underemployed. So for the working family subsidies, now it's 144 working hours. Can we lower this threshold so that more households can benefit? Because for working household benefits, this is an ongoing scheme. It is easier for you to enhance it. That is just to lower the requirements of 144 working hours. This is the first point. Second, about individual trade, I agree that people in the tourism sector are really suffering a lot. This sector is hardest hit by the epidemic. But there are also some trades. For instance, in Temple Street and also in Mongkok, so-called the Women's Street. In the past, it was very crowded. Travelers and even local people were crowded there. But now it's so very quiet. And I've talked to the people there, and they said they were really suffering a lot. And second, for the inns and they have been left vacant in the past months. So I hope that in the coming rounds, the administration would also look into this and take care of them. For the catering industry, it's relatively better because the business have not been severely affected. So I hope that the administration could take a look at other trades as well. Chairman, under the AEF, we have tried to assist different sectors, and we agree that in the future we will try to see if we should extend its coverage so that other sectors in need could also be covered. For the working families subsidies, now the requirement is 144 hours. But now, as long as it's 34 hours per week, they would be eligible. So if it is 34 hours per week, it is already regarded as underemployment. But then because the situation is getting more serious, so we will take a look at it again to see whether we could relax a little bit so that more people or more households could benefit. As regards the arrangement for the second tranche, we are still examining the details. There are about 100,000 SEPs who have not applied for the $7,500 in the first tranche. So we are trying to see whether we could open it up for these group of people to apply, and we will provide more clear information for them. As the ESS. The ESS tried to help the SMEs. So from the first tranche, we can see that over 97% applicants are owners of SMEs. Mr. Shiu Ka-fei. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to respond to Dr. Fernando Cheung. First of all, under ESS, you can ask the chief executive. We have expressed our views in front of her. We told her that there are a lot of people who were unemployed or unemployed. We should come up with some scheme to help them. You could also ask the financial secretary. We have suggested him to provide unemployed or no pay leave subsidies to those people who are taking no pay leave. So the present scheme is very close to the concept that we have raised to the government. We totally understand the situation of the employees. That's why we have suggested or made these suggestions to the administration, including the CE and the financial secretary. If a company does not have enough operating capital, then it would not be able for it to sustain, and not to mention to continue to employ its staff. Of course, we hope that the employers could try its best to support its staff. For those who are taking no pay leave or who are underemployed, we really hope that the employers will be able to help these people after receiving subsidies from the government. But there are also some companies that have not reduced the salaries of its employees in the past, and this is why the government has now come up with ESS, and the money would be able to support this kind of employers. Well, Dr. Jiang, you have to understand that. Well, this is nothing personal, Dr. Jiang. We have to know that the most important thing is to safeguard or to protect the enterprises. If the enterprises or the companies cannot sustain, then it cannot continue to employ its staff. You was just now citing overseas cases, but then those are big enterprises. Well, I have known some young people who worked, whose employers were reluctant to apply or to apply for ESS. So don't stigmatize the scheme, because there might be some companies that do not want to apply for ESS because they are worried that their reputation will be tarnished. Well, the result is that the company cannot sustain, and then its staff cannot continue to be employed.
So the meeting should end at 10, but if members don't object, then I would extend the meeting time a bit so that we can finish with voting on this motion. So can the colleague please switch on the projector, please? So we will put this to the vote, and that is the motion moved by Mr. Michael Look and Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. This is a motion moved without notice. Thank you, Chairman. My motion is this. Under the double whammy of the black-clad violence and COVID-19, people's lives have been adversely affected. Many sectors have been hard hit, and there are uncertainties in the labor market, and there is a greater need for employment support measures. The government must face up to the problem of unemployment and think up solutions to resolve the matter. So in this connection, the panel urges the government to draw up effective measures to strengthen support for employees' different sectors, including one, enhancing the checking of the ESS and also plug loopholes to prevent the employers abusing the system and undermining the employment interest of employees. Second is to provide cash subsidy for the unemployed and also launch an unemployment assistance scheme. 3, to create more time-limited posts and enhance the retraining places. 4th, to list the COVID-19 as an occupational disease, and so that the employers are clearer about their responsibilities. So those who are in favor, please raise your hand. 4. Those who are against, please raise your hand. 3. Those who are in abstention, 1. So the motion is carried. So that's it for the special meeting of the Manpower panel. So I hope the Secretary can consider our views and that you can enhance the next tranche of the ESS. Thank you.